Clara Bennett had learned to read a room the way other people read weather. Tonight, standing at the edge of her sister's wedding reception with a spoon in one hand and a water glass in the other, she read 300 faces at once, and every one of them was about to learn something they didn't expect. 3 weeks earlier, her mother had called with a voice as bright as wrapping paper, and in that same cheerful tone, had removed Clara's 7-year-old daughter from the wedding entirely. Not just from her role, from the guest list. A little girl who had spent 2 months practicing in the hallway of their apartment, twirling in a lavender dress every night after her bath, counting her spins out loud like they were the most important numbers in the world. By the time Clara understood exactly what her daughter's place at that wedding had been traded for, she was already contracted to cook the dinner for 200 guests. So she cooked it. Every course plated to perfection. And when the cake was wheeled out, she stood up in the middle of the ballroom and tapped her glass with a spoon. What she said took 3 minutes. Her mother hadn't spoken to her since. That was the least interesting part of the story. To understand what happened in that ballroom, you have to understand the 20 years before it. Clara's father died when she was 17. Her mother, Margaret, grieved the only way she knew how, through appearances. The lawn stayed trimmed. The holiday cards went out on time. Somebody had to produce that image on a widow's pension, and that somebody became Clara. She cooked the holiday dinners. She learned to stretch a small paycheck across a family of 4, then 3. At 19, she made Christmas dinner for 20 relatives and ate her own plate standing at the counter, because the good table only sat 20, and a daughter, her mother said, makes room. Margaret never called it a burden. She called it what Clara was good at. There's a difference between being loved and being useful, but when you're 17 and your father just died, those two feelings can arrive on the same plate, and it takes years to taste which one you were actually being fed. Clara built something of her own anyway. By 28 she owned a catering company, Bennett & Company, with her name on the side of a van and a walk-in cooler she'd signed the lease for with shaking hands. Her second-in-command, Helen, could butterfly a chicken faster than anyone in 3 counties, and had exactly one facial expression reserved for Clara's family. Clara married young, had her daughter Lily at 27, divorced amicably at 30. It was her and Lily now, 15 minutes from her mother's house, orbiting the family the way Clara always had, bringing the food, being needed, mistaking that for being loved. Then her younger sister Rachel got engaged to a sweet, unremarkable young man named Andrew Collins, whose family happened to be the closest thing their small town had to royalty. The insurance agency on the square, the pew at the front of the church, the hospital wing with their name on it in letters you could read from a moving car. And above it all sat Andrew's grandmother, Eleanor Whitaker, pearls at breakfast, a voice that never needed to be raised, and a gift for making a compliment sound like an appraisal. Margaret did not celebrate the engagement. She ascended into it. She gripped Clara's arm in the kitchen and said they would walk into that family through the front door, as equals. Clara understood the hunger behind it. Her mother had spent her whole life as the poor relation, the one the church ladies were kind to in a way that looked down while it smiled. What Clara didn't notice, standing in that kitchen, was the quiet arithmetic already forming behind her mother's eyes. A woman calculating exactly what she was willing to spend to keep her seat at a table that wasn't hers. The first item on that bill wasn't her mother's to pay. It was Clara's. The venue deposit came to $7,200. Clara wrote the check without blinking. The catering, 5 courses for 200 guests, she billed at cost, with the balance quietly waived as her gift. Helen watched her sign the contract and said nothing, which from Helen meant everything. But the best part of that spring had nothing to do with money. Rachel had knelt down in Clara's kitchen, right at Lily's eye level, and asked with full ceremony if she would be the flower girl. Lily went still the way she does when something matters too much to move, then nodded like she was being knighted. For 2 months after that, the hallway became her aisle. She tore up junk mail into confetti petals and rationed them out, one for each step. You can't just dump them, Mama. You have to share them with the whole aisle. At night she'd put on the lavender dress and discover spinning, Then turn it into a discipline. Arms out, chin up, counting out loud until she hit a new personal best and reported it like a lab result. 18 mama. 18 spins. The dress lived on her closet door where she could see it from bed. The first crack appeared in April, at the menu tasting. Both families gathered in Clara's kitchen on folding tables, and Eleanor Whitaker arrived like weather, unhurried, inevitable. She tasted everything, complimented everything in that same appraising tone, and her eyes did a slow inventory of the room. The second-hand chairs, Margaret's off-the-rack dress, Lily filling bread baskets with careful two-handed folds. Beside Eleanor sat her other granddaughter, 6-year-old Charlotte, bored in patent shoes. Eleanor watched both girls the way you'd compare two swatches of fabric against a wall, then said lightly, to no one and everyone, that Charlotte had been the flower girl at 3 Whitaker weddings. That child was born for a church aisle. A silence dropped over the table with a draft in it. Margaret laughed too fast and reached for the old family proverb, the one she pulled out whenever generosity needed a chaperone. Well, everyone gives something to make a wedding beautiful. Clara noticed. She filed it away and told herself it was nothing. Later that night she called her mother directly, then called Rachel separately on purpose, believing in redundant systems. Both gave her the same answer. Lily was the flower girl. It was settled. Rachel even texted a photo an hour later. The lavender dress on its hanger, a heart drawn over it, captioned "My girl." 2 people. 2 confirmations. 1 photograph with a heart on it. There was no third call to make. There was only trust, and Clara chose it. What she couldn't have known was that the answer had been true when they gave it. The sale simply hadn't closed yet. May disappeared into wedding logistics, rented china, extra staff. Herbs started in trays because Clara was particular about her mint. And in the middle of it, small things began to not add up. At the venue walkthrough, her mother introduced her to the coordinator with one hand on her shoulder. "This is the caterer," and only afterward, almost as an afterthought, added, "My daughter." The budget, too, began performing miracles no one could explain. A drone videographer, a champagne tower, chair covers upgraded to something with a French name. When Clara asked where the money was coming from, her mother waved her off. "I've managed it. A mother finds ways." Then came the bachelorette party, which Clara catered, because of course she did. Near midnight, boxing up leftovers in a rented lake house kitchen, one of the bridesmaids, deep in champagne and sincerity, leaned in and said, "Thank God for Mrs. Whitaker, though." Seriously, if she hadn't stepped up with a... And then the girl's face did the thing faces do when a sentence hits a guardrail installed by someone more sober than she was. "The flowers," she corrected quickly in a different voice. "She's helping with some flowers. I'm so drunk, ignore me." She laughed too loudly, grabbed her cake, and left faster than her heels should have allowed. Clara stood there with the roll of plastic wrap in her hand, doing the thing she does with numbers when a client's books don't balance. Not panicking, just noticing. Stepped up with the what? 9 days before the wedding, Clara was in the walk-in cooler counting cases of butter when her phone rang. She answered with her shoulder, pen still moving through her prep list. Her mother opened with logistics, final headcounts, a cousin's dietary restriction, and then in the exact same breezy tone, without so much as a pause for breath, she said the processional had been updated. Charlotte would be doing the flower girl honors. It was a Whitaker tradition apparently going back generations, and since the reception really was more of an adult crowd, they thought it simplest if Lily just sat this one out. She'd be much happier at home with a sitter anyway. The cooler fan hummed. Clara's pen stopped moving. "You're uninviting her," she said quietly. "From the wedding." "Uninviting is a dramatic word," her mother said, having just done exactly that. "It's a kindness, honestly. Everyone gives something to make a wedding beautiful, Clara. Don't make this a thing." Clara hung up and stood in the cold a long moment. Helen found her there and turned off the mixer without asking why. That same evening, cruelly, was Lily's final dress fitting. marked on her homemade countdown calendar with 3 exclamation points. Clara didn't have the heart to cancel it. So at 6 o'clock, her daughter stood in the middle of the commercial kitchen in her lavender dress, socks against the painted concrete because shoes might scuff, and spun with her arms out and her chin up while Helen counted along with her. She landed at 18, flushed and triumphant, and shouted her number like a lab result she was proud of. Clara clapped along, her mother's phone call sitting in her chest like a swallowed stone, watching her daughter shine inside a role that had already, quietly, been sold out from under her. She told her the next night, in the gentlest version she could build. Plans had changed. It would be a grown UPS-only wedding. Nothing to do with her, nothing she'd done wrong. Lily nodded, folded her hands, and said okay in a voice far too calm for a 7-year-old. 2 hours later, passing her door at bedtime, Clara heard the sound, small, muffled, deliberately hidden in a pillow. She went in. Lily surfaced, blotchy, trying to be fine, and asked the question that would live in Clara's chest for the rest of her life. "Mama, did I do something wrong?" She'd decided on her own that she'd been fired. In her world, roles were earned, so losing one meant a performance review had gone badly. Over the following days, Clara watched her daughter quietly close the file on herself. The dress stayed on the closet door, but Lily stopped looking at it from bed. The countdown calendar disappeared into a drawer, folded, not crumpled, which was somehow worse. And she stopped spinning. No more counting in the hallway. A 7-year-old had retired her own personal record without a word of complaint, and that was the detail that finished Clara completely. The truth took 9 more days and 1 accidental slip to fully surface. The venue coordinator mentioned in passing that the grandmother's second check had cleared for the videographer. Such a generous family. A thread. The bridesmaid's guardrail failure at the lake house. Another thread. And then the one that finally snapped the seam. Clara drove to the bridal shop for Rachel's last fitting, waited while the seamstress pinned the hem, and asked her sister one calm question, the same voice she used when a client's deposits didn't match their register. What exactly did Eleanor's $10,000 buy? She hadn't known the number. She guessed low to sound like she already knew. Rachel, pinned into her wedding dress, went white and corrected her without thinking. It wasn't 5, it was 10, and then pressed a hand over her own mouth as the mirrors gave Clara 6 reflections of her sister realizing what she'd just confirmed. Came out in pieces. A check from Eleanor after the tasting. A wedding fund. One condition, spoken and understood. Charlotte carries the basket. Mom said Lily would never even have to know, Rachel said, crying now, pins and all. It's 1 walk down 1 aisle. It didn't seem like it cost anything. Clara looked at her sister. The bride, her daughter, had torn up junk mail for every night for 2 months, and heard herself say from somewhere very far away, it cost 18 spins. She drove straight to her mother's house. Found her at the kitchen table with a seating chart and a pair of tweezers, moving place cards like she was planning a military campaign. Clara didn't sit down. When were you going to mention what the check bought? Margaret didn't deny it. Denial would have meant admitting something wrong had happened. Instead, she presented her case, calm and rehearsed, like a woman reading a shareholder report. The Whitakers were spending $60,000 on this wedding. Their side's whole contribution was, and she said this without any apparent shame, you cooking. Was Rachel supposed to walk into that family looking like the poor relation? Eleanor's gift had dignity in it. And Charlotte was a lovely child. Traditions mattered to old families. Lily would bounce back, children forget these things by summer. Children forget. Clara thought of her daughter, who still remembered the name of a waitress who'd given her extra cherries 2 years ago. She asked one more question, the one she'd rehearsed the whole drive over. Did you cash the check before or after you crossed your own granddaughter off the guest list? Her mother's hand stayed still on the table, but her chin lifted. The tell she used whenever a question was, in her opinion, beneath answering. Which was also the tell she used when the answer was bad. Don't be vulgar about the order of things, she said. It was all one arrangement. All one arrangement. It was the tedious confession her mother would ever give. Clara didn't yell. Yelling would have made her the dramatic one. Handed her mother a role she already had a costume for. She said only, "Thank you for being precise," and left, closing the front door as softly as she would a sleeping child's. She thought about pulling out of the wedding entirely. She priced it line by line the way she priced everything. Walking off a contract 12 days out would torpedo her standing with a venue that fed her half her business. It would punish 200 guests who had never done anything worse to her than dance badly. And underneath all of it was Lily, who overheard her arguing with Helen in the kitchen about pulling the crew, tugged on her apron, and looked up with those serious, careful eyes. "Don't wreck Aunt Rachel's wedding, Mama. The flowers are going to be so pretty." That settled it. Clara would cook the wedding every course perfectly, because her name was on the van either way. But somewhere between the cooler and that small hand on her apron, a second menu had started writing itself. Calm. Itemized. She wrote her toast on index cards the same way she wrote a kitchen prep list, because if her hands were going to shake in that ballroom, they were going to shake holding something she trusted. Helen read the cards on her break, made one edit, crossed out upset, wrote precise, and handed them back without a word. 5 days before the wedding, Rachel texted an offer, careful and bright. Lily was welcome at the reception after all. There was a seat at table 14, once the ceremony part was finished. Clara knew that table. It sat by the kitchen doors behind the speaker stack, reserved for plus ones nobody had met. A consolation chair, offered on the condition that Clara stay pleasant. The old version of her might have taken it. Half a loaf, at least her daughter gets cake. But she thought of the folded calendar, the retired spin count, and typed back only Lily has plans. The wedding ran exactly as beautifully as Clara had built it to run. She wasn't at the ceremony, she was in the kitchen where the caterer belongs, but she heard secondhand that Charlotte had gotten bored halfway down the aisle and handed her basket to a groomsman. And she heard secondhand too, that Eleanor had told her whole table this was the best wedding food she'd had in 20 years. And asked who'd made it. Margaret's answer relayed back through the coordinator without irony. "Oh, a place we know." Clara laughed out loud, alone at the pass. There's a point past hurt where the truth just becomes funny. At the toast, she walked out of the kitchen in her chef's whites, glass in one hand, spoon in the other, and tapped it 3 times. The whole room turned, expecting one more sentimental speech. They got one, just not the kind they expected. She introduced herself as the bride's sister and the knight's caterer, or as I was introduced earlier, a place they know. She laid out the gift plainly. The dinner, the venue deposit, all of it hers, freely given. Then she laid out the price. 3 weeks ago, her 7-year-old daughter had been quietly removed from the guest list after 2 months of practicing to be the flower girl, because a $10,000 check had bought that role for someone else, and her mother had accepted it. She watched Andrew's jaw drop as he looked at his own grandmother. She watched her mother rise halfway out of her chair. And when Margaret reached for the family proverb one last time, "Everyone gives something to make a wedding beautiful," Clara let it land exactly where she wanted it to. Lily gave the most. She placed an invoice by the cake, the catering balance she'd planned to waive, now due in full, itemized, almost exactly the size of a certain check. Then she untied her apron, folded it, laid it over an empty chair, and told her sister, gently and honestly, that she loved her, and hoped her marriage started kinder than its opening ceremony had. She stopped once more beside Eleanor Whitaker's chair. "The food really is the best you've had in 20 years, she said. "Here's the other true thing. You bought an aisle tonight. But the little girl who practiced sharing her petals with the whole aisle, nobody in this room could afford her." Eleanor didn't argue. She gave a single small nod, one woman acknowledging that a line existed, even one she hadn't expected to meet. Clara walked out through the kitchen doors past Helen, who was holding her station like a color guard, and told her to finish the night, full pay, full polish, cake at 9:15. In the parking lot, she peeled the custom magnetic sign off her van, the one with both families' names on it, and sat behind the wheel long enough to let her hands finally shake. The bill came in installments the way bills like that always do. Missed calls with no voicemails from her mother. A tearful, half-slurred message from Rachel at 1 in the morning, apologizing between wedding band static. A bank transfer landing 11 days later. The full catering balance paid 4 days early, no memo, clearly funded by a second, quieter check from the Whitaker side. Clara's mother told the church ladies she'd embarrassed the family. Half of them nodded along. The other half started booking their events with a place they know. Rachel sent a printed thank you card from her honeymoon, and beneath the printed script had added in shaky pen that she was going to apologize to Lily herself in person when she was brave enough. Clara put it in a drawer, beside the folded calendar. The door wasn't locked. It just wasn't open yet. That Sunday in Clara's backyard, 6 people gathered around a folding table with a checkered cloth, lemon cake, and jam jars full of marigolds. They mowed a narrow aisle into the grass. Lily took the lavender dress off her closet door herself, her decision her ceremony, and walked it barefoot, scattering real petals, sharing them the whole way down, while 6 adults clapped like it was a royal wedding. Then she planted her feet, threw her arms out and spun. Cheeks blazing, curls flying, counting out loud with the whole yard counting behind her. She sailed past 18 without even slowing, and when she finally stumbled to a stop, she threw both fists in the air. 23, mama. New record. That night, tucking her in with grass still stuck to her feet, Clara watched her daughter go under with a small, certain smile, not a question this time but a finding filed and closed. I didn't do anything wrong. No, baby, Clara said. You never did. If there's one thing worth carrying out of a kitchen like hers, it's this. If you never send the bill, the people around you will quietly decide your work, your patience, and even your children come free. The kindest thing Clara Bennett ever did as a mother was stand up in a room full of chandeliers, tap a glass, and prove that nothing about them ever was.